Hi, Brandy.
Hello, Deborah.
I'm so happy that you're finally here. We've been trying to get together for a really long time and it hasn't worked out, but now is the perfect time.
It always works out in the time that it works out in, right?
Exactly. Brandy, you and I have known each other for a really long time, and our friendship and our relationship has grown in different ways. We've worked together professionally. You've coached me in areas of business because that is your background. And also, too, I work with your husband a lot I always say the wrong thing. What does he do?
He's a naturopath.
Thank you. I don't know. I'm just always like, Ian, tell me what I need to be doing, what I need to be eating, what I need to be taking care of. He's incredible. And you've worked alongside him for years. You're also a mama. You have 2 girls.
Yes. Miriam and Aurelia.
Yeah. And they're
12 and 14 now.
Wow. So you're into the teens.
Yes. Although I have to say, it's actually been lovely. And so you might have people who say, oh, when they get to be teenagers, watch out. You'll like them when they're little, but not. And like, that doesn't have to be true.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
I actually am glad you brought that up because I feel like you can create your own self-fulfilling prophecies with statements like that. And so I've even caught myself like, oh, that's the terrible twos. But does it have to be terrible? And so I think, there's sort of like these benchmarks that we cling on to, but sometimes they can create a scenario that maybe doesn't have to be the experience that you have.
I completely agree. And actually, I noticed as I've gone on that journey myself that most of the benchmarks, I'd be hard pressed to think of one that's positive in the way that people commonly speak about it. So as you just said, terrible twos.
Yep.
And then they'll say something about when they're 5 or something about when they become tweens or then they become teenagers. And actually all of the so-called popular wisdom, which I don't think is wise at all. It's all, as far as I can tell, it's all negative.
Yeah.
Or mostly negative. I did have one mom say to me when my girls were maybe 9 and 11, she said, oh, you're in the sweet spot because they're old enough to be kind of self-sufficient, but they're not yet teenagers. But if you think about it, like peel that back a little bit. And what it's saying is that you have this one nice spot that's sandwiched between terrible times. And I just want you to know that that has not been my experience at all.
Yeah.
Every single stage has been awesome. And it continues to be awesome. And I am really happy being a mother, and I love my daughters and I get along with them. And
that's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, that's what I want, that's what I hope. And so that's why I want to be, I guess, more conscious of the things that I say and like set the intention of what you want, not what you think is the standard.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to go.
There's no reason to have negative expectations at all.
I wanted to talk to you today because you've been a real inspiration in my life because you were a mom before me, and I sort of watched you go through motherhood, and you were supporting me a lot on our journey while we were deciding what we were going to do. And when we ended up at adoption, you were super supportive and, with us the whole way. So you were always sort of like my bright light that I followed as I hoped that I would become a mom one day. So, and we had that prayer answered last year. And I really wanted to have a conversation with you about, and this is going to seem like maybe it's heavy, but it's not really heavy. It's like, I want to figure out how to bring spirituality and connection with the divine into my baby's life and my child's life as she grows, because I didn't really have that growing up. I had very conflicting views about what that meant. And, on one hand, like my grandparents would send me off to Sunday school, but then when I would come home, they would tell me how stupid it was and it was all lies. And it was like, why are you sending me if you don't want me to believe any of it? So I was super conflicted, right?
Yes.
So then I went on a big path in my life. Like I went to India, I did meditation, I did yoga, I did anything that I was looking for a connection, but I didn't know how to find it. And I felt very repelled or not knowledgeable enough to forge a path with the divine. So that sort of left me questioning. And then, meeting you and sort of seeing the path that you and Ian have taken and how spirituality is such a strong part of your life, and you've been on your own journey with it. It sort of inspired me to start to bring it into my life in little ways. And so that's really what I wanted us to talk about today is like, how do you do that when you're starting at zero and you want to feel that connection, but you don't know how, and you feel like there's a rule book, but you don't know what it is, and it feels a slightly alienating, which I know it's not meant to, because you're supposed to feel more connected. So that's kind of the broad strokes.
Well, thank you for the question, first of all. Yeah, so I relate to your background. I was raised in what you would call kind of a metaphysical background. And there were actually some good teachings there, which I know will shock some of my friends to hear. No, there were some good teachings there, but it wasn't enough. It was far from sufficient. And it was confusing because it was very removed from the rest of life. It wasn't really integrated into daily life in any meaningful way. I went to Berkeley. I started going to an ashram when I was at Berkeley and lived in a home that was very ashram-like. I studied comparative religions. I was also seeking and curious and a little confused and not really sure that I wanted to commit to any of those paths. And I probably would have stayed there, except that at some point in the work that I was doing with my husband, or that he was doing and I was assisting him with, he was really looking for how do you bring people to a state not just of physical health, but of well-being. And to that end, he did a lot of different research. And in the midst of that, at some point, he and I decided to just start praying. Not as a part of any particular tradition or any religious path, but just to reach out to the divine and ask for help. And we were answered. We received answers. We received help. And we found that seems to be, I mean, there's scientific studies to support this, but that's not really what guided us, to be honest with you. It was completely empirical and experiential on our part, which was simply putting our heads down and asking a higher power for help. And at the time that we started doing this, we didn't have a particular name or any particular knowledge of who or what that higher power was, but something inside of us guided us to reach out, I think would be the best way of putting it. And we started doing some really deep thoughts about, well, if you're going to reach out to this higher power, what's the best way to do that? And how do you develop a relationship? And all the things that you might wonder about, like, do you really just come to this higher power with a laundry list? I want this, I want that.
Right.
You know, and I'll skip to the end, which is that through a lot of years of contemplation and then, and more study, but we can get to that later. My conclusion was it's important to develop a relationship with that higher power the way you would with a truly good and loving parent. And for those of us, and we know many people like this who didn't have truly good and loving parents, that can be really challenging.
Because you don't even know what that means. And then because I know for me, like, I think when I first started to like actually sit down and pray, I felt like the divine was so much bigger than me. And I was just this, I wasn't looking at it like that relationship at all. I was looking at it super unbalanced. And to your point, like not wanting to go and it be like, I need help with this, and this, which you clearly do.
Yes.
But it was hard to learn how to do it and to feel like, was I doing it right? Am I feeling the connection? How do I know if I'm connecting? How it was so many things. And then also too, like not really having anybody to talk to about it. Because there was another piece of me, I think particularly working in the entertainment business, it's not like you're like running around like, I prayed this morning, because it's like, it's not particularly something that everybody's talking about. But I was like, so it's this sort of like very lonely journey while you're trying to figure it out. But that is also the antithesis of it because like, it's about feeling connected, right? So it's this weird push and pull.
That's a really good point. And I would also say, I think one of the cautions that I had for a long time before I started to get much more articulate in my understanding of my own spiritual identity, and that took a long time for me.
That's very well put. Yeah.
was I felt uncomfortable even discussing it with those who do pray and who would discuss that openly, because I felt it was my perception. And it might not be a fair perception, but I often felt that there was a pull from them to either get pulled into their tradition,
Right.
whatever it was, or maybe a rejection because I wasn't part of their tradition.
Yep.
And that could definitely just be a perception issue.
Right.
I'm not saying that that's the reality of it, but it was a concern that I had.
I felt that too, because I felt like if I wasn't under their umbrella of their church, was I allowed to still have a connection with the divine? And I think through my work with you guys and just life, I feel very clearly now that it's an individual relationship that you have, regardless of what the building is or the banner that goes above it. But I also do think that there's tenets to it that you learn as you move along. But it's been I think looking back now, I realize that I've always had a relationship with God, but I just didn't know that it was there, and that I think you can call on it and be connected to it all times of the day, not just in the moments that you sit down to pray.
I agree. I would also say, I mean, what became very clear to me is that God really is the creator of all. I will, by the way, I'll refer to God as He simply for the limitations of language. And I know that makes some people uncomfortable because they really see that the divine is both masculine and feminine. And I just want to agree with all of those people right now. The divine is absolutely transcends both masculine and feminine. But for the limitations of language, I use the pronoun he. And but he did create each one of us. I'm convinced of that. But just because he created us doesn't mean that we have a relationship with him. I think there's always an invitation to relationship with him. And he also created us with free will. And so we have the option to accept that invitation and pursue that relationship, or to not. And I do believe that relationship exists out beyond any particular religious tradition, that it is ineffable. It's a connection between us and our creator. And religious traditions can definitely support that and expand it and do some beautiful teachings about that, can offer opportunities for worship, and all of those things which are wonderful. But the fundamental relationship itself belongs to the individual and to God, the creator. And no religion can give that to you, and no religion can supersede it, as far as I'm concerned. And so the first step for me was getting really clear that he is also my creator, regardless of what all the different noise was that I was hearing from different religious traditions. I have a unique and powerful relationship with him if I choose to pursue it. It's on offer.
That's interesting that it's a two-way street.
Yes.
Which I think, it's that one area in my life that I still feel kind of like a child. I feel like I've figured out life pretty good, right? Like you've got the career going, you've got, you've figured out how to navigate your life. But it's the one area where I still feel like I don't know a lot. And so I feel, I don't know what the word is, like I feel inadequate, in terms of like my knowledge. And I just go back to that it's about the connection. If you were to say if somebody were listening today and they were like, I want to explore the divine, what would you say are some good ways to start? Like training wheels, if you will.
Sure. Well, the best way to start is by reaching out in prayer, honestly, and it doesn't have to be complicated. And it's not performative, it's sort of like as if you were going to pick up the phone and call somebody and try to establish a relationship with them. Think of prayer that way. And with many people that I've spoken with about that, who were doubting if the divine even really existed, I've just said, then just say, God, if you're there.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Because, if you're there, would you please help me with this thing, whatever it is? And I can't think of anyone whom I have suggested that to who didn't take me up on it and who didn't very shortly thereafter simply start praying to God, because they realized that he really was there and he heard, and they had evidence of that in their heart, but also in their lives. And as a parent, I can relate to this so much better now, because if I had a child who was distant from me and that child came to me to try to form some connection, you can imagine how overwhelmed with joy I would be.
Right.
And
Right.
right.
Mhm.
And I truly believe that God is just like that. He's just like a spiritual parent. And I think he's overwhelmed with joy when we do finally knock on the door, however shyly and however inarticulately. And even if we're asking for quote unquote the wrong things, right? I genuinely believe it delights God for us to just reach out to him and start to forge that connection.
Well, there's that saying, thank God for unanswered prayers. You know, there's things that you think that you want and you think you want your life to go, and then it doesn't. And so you feel like, oh, well, maybe my prayers were not answered, but then something more appropriate, better, more aligned with you happens.
Yes.
So it just didn't look the way you imagined it, but you were taken care of, if you will.
Yeah. And those conundrums come up in parenting as well.
Yeah.
Your child will ask you for something that you know isn't good for them, but maybe they're 3 and they want Kool-Aid or high fructose corn syrup filled juice or something like that, and you say no and you offer them something else instead, and it might be 10 years before they start to understand enough chemistry and biology and nutrition to understand why you told them no.
Right.
But at the point that they do start to understand, they'll be grateful. So yeah, there's so many of these scenarios in the way, like I really started to understand. I feel like and I'm not saying I completely understand God. Please don't. That's not what I'm saying. But I started to have this sort of conception the deeper I got into parenting, which actually brings me back to your original question, I think, which was how do you relate this to parenting? How do you weave it into your parenting? And the first thing I would say is I pray for divine protection over my children every day. And I would really encourage every parent to do that. Not because the world is a terrifying place. It's not that so much, but I've realized how many times, I don't even know how many times. I know some of the times when I have truly been saved from harm through what I genuinely believe was divine intervention. And I want to request that for my children every single day, that they are watched over, that they are protected. And they're old enough now to ask it for themselves, and I believe they do. But when they were very young, they didn't. And I still think it matters if a mother or a father or a grandmother or anyone who has authority and caretaking responsibility for a child, if they reach out and ask for help in protecting that child and guiding them in the right path, I really recommend that. And that only takes a moment.
Yeah, I do that, and I remembered you that because you had told me that. And at first I was like, I hadn't even thought about it because in my mind I'm like, I'm protecting them. But why not create an extra layer of that, even for your own peace of mind?
For sure. And also there are things against which you realize at some point as a parent, there are things that you can't protect them from. We're only human.
Right. You can't be everywhere all the time.
You can't. Can I tell a little story about that?
Yeah, please.
So this is just my own personal experience, but when my girls were very young, I think they were both in car seats. One was a baby, one was a toddler. We were just driving to the park, and I was driving down a one-way street, and a car did not stop at a stop sign on a cross street.
Oh, wow.
And I saw it coming out of the corner of my eye. And it's that moment when I was like, that car is going to hit us. And it's going to hit us exactly where the car seat is in the back. Like, your brain can make those calculations really quickly. And so I swerved to the left away from the car just to give myself, maybe another half a second of time. And I don't know why I hit the brakes actually, because that wasn't the right thing to do. But I did. And the other car, fortunately, hit the brakes. All I know is there were actually a couple of people on the sidewalk there. The car came within an inch of my car and did not hit us. And I remember the bystanders looking like this, and everyone could see that an accident was going to happen, but the accident did not happen. And I got out of the car and, looked around, and sure enough, like the cars were an inch apart, but had not actually hit. I've always suspected, because the other driver never got out of the car. And so I've always had a suspicion that she may not have been sober. And anyway, the bystanders were like, that's impossible. How did the accident not happen? And I really feel that there was divine intervention in that. Yeah. And you can agree with me or not agree with me on that part of it, but what I would say is it just illustrated for me, let's say that other driver was not sober. And let's say I did my best to be protective and defensive in my driving. There are still things that happen in this world that are beyond our control. And it did just kind of reemphasize to me the need for divine protection that is beyond what I can do humanly.
Yeah. It's interesting that you tell that story, because I feel like even with the adoption of Rumi, we'd been on the journey for like roughly 3 years, and we'd done everything we could physically do to bring about that amazing gift, right? We'd done everything, and there was nothing else we could do but wait and wait. And it's very frustrating when you're, being a TV producer, I get stuff done, right? So I was like, what? I need to get this baby here, right? But this, so we wait. And I prayed on it a lot, because I really knew at that point I had no control over the outcome. And it was probably the first time where I really acknowledged that I had no control over the outcome. Because usually I think before I felt like, okay, I can maneuver it this way, maneuver it that way. But I really didn't. I had run out of all of the tricks. And so I just prayed, and I kept praying, and time kept dragging on. And then one day, out of the blue, she showed up. And that was a miracle.
That was a miracle.
And she's perfectly healthy. And it was in California, where everything just flowed with it. And it was a divine experience. And
really nice.
So seeing that and experiencing that, like, I've had other moments, but that was definitely one where I was like,
yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the prayers that I say often is, because again, I've realized this is part of forming a relationship. And so in my prayers, I will say, I promise to do whatever I can possibly do, but I need you to do the part that I can't do. And so will you please help me? And because I feel like at some points, as we mature in our relationship, there is an expectation that we will step up as well. And there's that balance between overestimating my abilities and my, what I can do. But also, so I don't want to overestimate myself. I definitely don't want to pretend like I am God, because I am not.
Right.
But I also want to be as willing as I possibly can to do whatever I am able to do. I think it really is a partnership. And again, I just go back to the parenting analogy.
Right.
As your children grow up, you hope and pray and do what you can to help them to mature, to become self-sufficient, to develop skills, to use their gifts, to use their brain, right? You want them to use all those things, but you also do want them to ask you for help, because you have more experience, because you have developed more wisdom, ideally, and that's a good partnership. And so I assume that God is the same, that he wants me to grow up. He wants me to be mature. He wants me to be willing and focused and self-disciplined. And there are parts that only he can do. And so, I'm very humble in understanding that. So, yeah.
I know that for me, when I was struggling with some things, this was years ago, and you and Ian said, well, have you considered, do you pray? Have you considered praying? And I was just like, no. Had not considered that. I got an astrology reading. I went to a clairvoyant. I did a detox, but I did not consider any of that.
Yeah, that was a little nerve-wracking for us in general, not you in particular.
Yeah.
When we started to broach that topic with our clients, I remember the first time when we realized that we had actually been given a directive in our own prayers that we needed to share this with our clients. And you can imagine the sweaty palm feeling that we had.
Yeah.
It makes me nervous actually just going back and remembering it. Yeah. Which is funny, because we've been doing it for something like 15 years now or longer. And as it turns out, including we've gotten every kind of response you can imagine, as you would imagine we would. And I think we've only had a fairly harsh rejecting response on a couple of occasions. It is amazing how challenging it can be to move into an area that you are not comfortable with and that you weren't necessarily raised with and seems a little bit foreign territory to you. Now I offer to pray for people all the time, whether I know them or don't know them, or know their beliefs or don't know their beliefs, and they can say yes or no, and I'm fine with either one. But yeah, I do remember back to those days when we first started broaching it with our clients. And interestingly enough, the vast majority of them said, no, I have not considered praying. Tell me a little bit more about that. They were curious, maybe a little standoffish or a little, that's a little weird, but not so weird that they weren't curious.
Right.
And
well, I also think too, like you get to a point in your life, I feel like you reach out when you have no other, unfortunately, and nothing else is working and you need help in whatever area of your life that you need it. And so then you're like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Tried everything else. And I still keep running up against this. So yeah, I'll give it a shot. But it's just, I don't know, it makes me laugh because it's such a simple thing and it should be so easy, but yet it's got so much layered on top of it that it makes it really complicated. Like I was listening to, I don't know if you listen to Andrew Huberman. He has a really amazing podcast, but he's a scientist and he does so much interesting stuff on longevity and the body, and not a spiritual podcast by any stretch of the imagination, but he just recently started talking about for the last year, he's incorporating prayer into his longevity routine, morning and night. And he expressed that it was the greatest decrease of his anxiety that he normally suffers after prayer. And so then to him, that was a marker that it is doing something for him on a physiological level in addition to a spiritual level. And so that has enticed him to keep going. And I just thought that was really interesting, to see somebody of science who was a sworn atheist, who's now sitting down and taking the time to pray.
Well, there's a lot. I think that's very interesting. And you're right. You articulated that beautifully because you pointed out that there are physiological, emotional, health-related benefits, and there's a spiritual sort of ineffable benefits that can't really be properly quantified.
Right.
The story that I just shared,
right.
A skeptic could say, hey,
right.
You just didn't get hit.
Right.
Right. But nonetheless, I would stand on there are those two different effects, although they're obviously related and one flows from the other one.
Right.
One of the things that I've noticed with prayer, especially when I broach the topic with people of have you considered praying, is, and this happens to me too, so I understand it, they immediately get tongue-tied. And so in addition...
It's weirdly like a new language.
It is.
It's not, but you're like, I don't know what to say.
I don't know what to say.
How do I address the divine? What are the words that are okay to use?
Yes.
If I use the wrong words...
What happens?
Am I
struck?
Yeah, exactly. But it's like all of those things and you become kind of mute, which is so... It's so ridiculous, but it happens. And
absolutely.
And you feel super inadequate about it.
Totally. Yeah. No, that's, and really what that is doing is exposing, it's like flipping over a rock and you see all the ants and the pill bugs that have been underneath there. You've just exposed a whole bunch that you weren't aware of that was going on inside. A really loud, it was quiet, but now all of a sudden the conversation has gotten really loud about, well, who is the divine and how do you address the divine and what do I believe about the divine and what do I say to the divine? And then there's a deeper level of, well, what is it that I actually want? Which most of us at any given moment don't necessarily know. And it's an incredibly important question to both ask and answer often. To really know what is it that you want? What are you asking for? And
it's so true because you think you're set in a pattern, right? And so you're praying for something to happen that you think is the right thing for your life. But it might actually not be what you truly desire or need or want. But you have to uncover that.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden when you contemplate going before a divine being and making a request, all of that, if you have any lack of clarity, if you have any confusion around that, that's all going to get surfaced. It's actually really important, as you can imagine. We do need to sort through all of that. This idea, it's very interesting because is an interesting facet to this. You brought up, how do I address the divine?
Right.
What words can I use?
Right.
Those are very religious questions.
Right.
Right?
But that's what we've been trained in my Sunday school classes.
So you were not a religious person when we had this conversation.
Right.
But you immediately fell back on religious.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And my experience as a parent, if my child came up to me and called me mama, mom, mother, Brandy, I would answer to any of them.
Right.
And many others besides, especially if I were estranged from that child, if I didn't have a relationship with that child, call me anything, just call me.
Right.
And so, I mean, my experience and religious people get into hot debates over this.
And we are not wanting to do that.
And we're not going to do that. But my experience is that the most important thing is just call out to God and use whatever title, appellation feels right to you. Just go with it. Just do it.
Yeah.
You know, higher power and the one who ever is. Just call out to God. When you start to develop that relationship, something will settle in that feels right. And, you know, some kids call their mother's mom and some kids call her something completely different.
Right.
And they still have a relationship. So just call is kind of where I landed with it. What's acceptable to say? I think what's in your heart is what's acceptable to say. And again, if you go back to the analogy of the parent, if you have a child who's struggling, who needs help, who's coming to you for something, you want to hear all of it. As a loving parent, you want them to talk. Even if some of those feelings or some of their assumptions, you might say, well, that's not entirely appropriate or that's not entirely correct. You want it all to be surfaced so that it can be worked through and thought about and contemplated. So again, I would say whatever is in your heart, if there is a divine, and there is, the divine already knows what's in your heart, but wants to hear you say it.
Right.
So whatever is in your heart. And sometimes what's in your heart is anger towards the divine. And I believe that's okay to express too. You know, if my child comes to me and says that they're angry with me for something, in my case, because I'm human, sometimes it might be justified. Right? I'm not God. But let's assume, you know, like from God's perspective, that our anger towards God would never be justified in the truest sense of reality. That doesn't mean that He's a loving God, so He's not going to reject you for being angry. But He's going to take you by the hand and by the heart, and He's going to help you sort through it. And that's what you need. So my answer, what is acceptable to say to God? Whatever is true, whatever is in your heart.
I think it's a really good point, because it sort of relates back to Ian and your work too, because I do want to touch on what Ian does, because he's helped me immensely over the years. At different times for very different things. But he's a master and he's incredibly excellent at what he does. But what I did learn through my work with him is that piece that you were talking about, like, say, the anger, like whatever emotions that you don't actually even realize you're operating out of or that you've pushed down. He has a brilliant way of getting you to see what they are, working on them and clearing them out. So then you can go to the next step of whatever journey you're on. And like, I know for me, like, it's sort of like, growing up in Australia, it's like, can't be mad about anything. You know, you have to be positive and happy about everything. But they're natural emotions and they're blockages.
Yes.
Is how I look at them. And so
They can be.
they can be.
Yeah.
And you also can't take that next step forward in your life while you're still operating out of that lower consciousness, if you will. So Ian was like remarkable to me. Could you explain his work a little bit? Because I can't explain it. I just tell people, go see him. He and Brandy are excellent. They'll figure it out. But I don't really know what it is. I know he's a naturopath, but like, you know.
What is that piece of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the question I most commonly get
This is the $1 million question.
Yes. What does Ian Mussman actually do? Yeah. And
I think I went to him initially for weight loss.
Yeah.
Like somebody had gone to him.
You and many people.
Yeah, somebody had gone to him and lost like 40 pounds. And I was like, sign me up. And then when I met him and then we started, you know, he was testing what is it called?
Oh,
Muscle testing.
Yes, he was doing, yes.
So
the kinesiology.
yeah, the kinesiology.
Yeah.
And we started talking about a bunch of different things.
Yes.
And it was nothing to do with my losing weight. And I didn't lose weight, but so it didn't work for me. But my life got better in every other way. And I got more emotional clarity. So, and also physical stuff too.
Right. Yeah. Well, so because it's, we are one being and we look at ourselves through these different lenses of spiritual, physical, emotional, but you can't separate them any more than you can separate out, I don't know, your veins from your arteries. They're part of one system, and you can't have one without the other. If you're going to have blood pumped out, you need to have blood returned, right?
Right.
So what he does is he listens to what you've brought to him. I'm coming here for this, and then
does something completely different.
And then he does something completely different often, yes. Because what he'll look at is, but what is really calling out as an imbalance? What's the topmost imbalance that needs to be shifted here with this person? And for many people, it is an emotional block. And it can be for a long time. And there are different roots to those emotional blocks. The most common roots would be a relationship. No,
I'm just left flashing back. You go there and I'm like, okay, I don't feel good in this area. And then Ian's like, well, who are you angry at right now?
Yes.
And I'm like, nobody.
And I'm about to be angry at you.
Yeah.
You keep asking that question.
And I'm like, nobody. Fine. And then he's like, well, just think about it. Have you had any run-ins with people or been disappointed, whatever it is, right? And then just go through the list and you're like, nope. Inevitably you land on something. And then you're like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that was like really weighing on me. Yeah. And really like trapped in my heart.
Yes. And also potentially, and this is where he gets really good with the kinesiology, is potentially in a different part of your body as well.
Right.
Because emotions are, I won't get into the woo explanation of it. Let's just say emotions are real.
Yeah.
And they do exist within the body in a real way. Might be the best way of putting it. And
there's ramifications for emotions within the body.
There are.
Yeah.
There
Positive
are
and negative.
Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah.
And there are also information. It's an information guidance system. We will have emotions come up in us about something. And when we look at whatever the situation is or the person is or something like that, our mind might not be giving us any information about the situation or person, whereas our emotions are. That doesn't mean trust your emotions and disregard the mind. It just means that there's a data point coming to you through your emotions that should be acknowledged. Now, emotions are tricky because you might look at someone and have feelings of revulsion come up when you see that person. And that doesn't mean that it's about that person necessarily.
Right.
It could be about someone else in your past that you had a really negative experience with. And this person reminds you of that for some reason. So they're tricky. It would be unwise to take emotions strictly at face value. It is even more unwise to just ignore them, sideline them, shove them down, which is what most of us, or many of us anyway, were taught to do. They need to be acknowledged and then investigated. And that takes a little bit of work. It takes some skill.
Yeah.
Someone has to teach us how to do that. It takes some inquiry. It's useful.
Yeah.
And when they are acknowledged, they tend to release. I really do think that they're messages to us from a part of ourself that's beyond the cognitive. Pay attention. There's something here for you to pay attention to. And then it's up to us to acknowledge that by doing the investigative inquiry as to what am I supposed to pay attention to.
I was just thinking about my mom when she first came to you guys, and she was so mad because I think you guys were late.
Yes.
Which you're always late because you're always giving so much time to your clients. But so we all know that now. We know that it's not 2:00, it's 2:15. But she was not in that headspace at all and was very, very mad. And I, of course, had told her to go see you guys because I was like, they're amazing. You love them. Da, 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 da. So she goes and she's super, super angry. And I think the thing I remember the most about it is that she thought she was mad. And then Ian, who's not afraid of anybody. My mom's kind of, she'll force and she's in that mode. But he's not. And he just inquiry. And then they came to a place that it was her sadness. And it was underneath a lot of different emotional layers. And so to your point, the inquiry of how to get there.
Yes. He's particularly, I have to say, having been in this sort of natural health realm, I have a master's in organizational management and I was a massage therapist. So like,
I always forget that piece that you're a massage therapist.
Because well, to be honest,
because I've never gotten a massage from you. So how?
But yes. It's an unforgettable experience. But it's because in organizational management, I was looking to see how could organizations maintain a state of health, really was what I was looking at.
Interesting.
And then that led me to, it's not going to be very easy unless the people who are in the organization, particularly leadership, are healthy. And then I realized that I didn't really know anything about health per se. And so my first step was, while I was working in the corporate world, I also became a licensed massage therapist. And I started learning anatomy and I started learning, bodily systems and things that I did not learn in high school or college. Anyway, ultimately, the combination of that actually led me to meeting Ian. But along the way, and even since then, I've encountered many people who will do emotional release work through a variety of different methods. And I know I'm married to him, so I'm going to sound like I'm completely prejudiced, and I probably am, but I've never...
He's great.
But... I've never met anyone who can do what he does.
Yeah.
And it's a gift.
Totally.
He, and also part of the gift is that he's very fast. He will quickly get you there.
Yeah.
Into the most hidden aspect. He will get you to the most hidden part.
Which is interesting because I think that's why you guys work really well together, because sometimes, because he is so surgical about it, sometimes as the person who's going through it, you need a minute to process where you're going.
Yeah.
And to your credit, you're excellent at just giving a little stopgap in between as we move through the layers, right? But then, as you've been doing it longer, you can keep up with him more. But he's really, really remarkable.
He is remarkable. I have to say, I just want to circle back to your mom. Your mom is one of my favorite people on the planet for good reason. And I do remember the first time we met, and I absolutely adore your mom. And one of the things that I adore her for was that, and this is unusual, she was so upset, and she was able to nonetheless not necessarily set that aside, but she was able and willing enough to go into that and see what was underneath it. And I think that's an extraordinary ability.
You're totally right, because she could have just stormed out.
She could have.
Like, you didn't meet her expectations.
Right.
She had a specific way she wanted it to go, and it didn't go that way. And you are totally right. She was able to feel all those things and put it aside and then still do the work.
Yeah. And she really instantaneously earned my respect.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
And it's only risen since then. That's quite an ability. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot.
It takes a lot to take a look at under the hood, if you will, of what's really going on.
It takes courage and humility.
Yeah.
And persistence.
Yeah.
Which, circling back to prayer, you mentioned, and this is true, that you had prayed for 3 years for Rumi to come into your life. That's persistence. And I believe that persistence is required in health. It says this: health is a pursuit. It's not a destination.
Yep.
It's a pursuit.
That's a great way to remember it. Because you never get there, right?
You never get there. It's, just like life, things are always changing.
Yeah.
And I believe our relationship with the divine is a pursuit. It's not like, oh, got it. I got it down. Yeah. Everything's good.
Yeah. Manifesting like a maniac. Yeah.
No, it doesn't really work that way. So those are pursuits, and they require persistence. And that's a really, really important concept, because I think most people fall short of health goals and broader goals in life because they don't persist.
Yeah.
They give up. And one thing I've learned about God is God will never give up on you. ever, no matter what you have done, no matter, it doesn't matter. He will never give up on you. And it's up to us to bring to the relationship as much as we can what he brings to the relationship, which is total fidelity, I think is the right word. He is a faithful God. He's faithful to us, which is extraordinary. If you think about it, that the divine would be faithful to a human being, but then go back to the parent analogy. And what healthy parent, emotionally healthy parent would not be faithful to their child no matter what that child had done, right? That doesn't mean that you're always going to reward your child and pat them on the head and tell them good job, because sometimes human beings make tragic mistakes and errors. But I don't think there's anywhere that my child could go that I really just genuinely believe this, that I would not follow them with every ounce of my being to support them and in whatever way I could. Sometimes as a parent, the way you support is by drawing back. I understand that.
Right.
But that's a deliberate drawing back. It's not an indifferent drawing back.
Right. The key word is indifference and it not being that.
There is, yes.
Yep.
And the other thing that I wanted to touch on with what you said is that healing itself is a skill. And I say this to my daughters. My older daughter right now is recovering from a knee injury. She's a dancer.
She had a big audition coming up.
She did.
And that fall was bad timing.
It was bad timing for that.
Yeah.
And so when, it was a big moment for her to go through this injury. It's going to be a 3-month recovery, and I'm so proud of her because she did do that inquiry with herself around it, and she's developing the skill of healing, which means she has to persist in her healing. So she gets up every morning and she doesn't just do the physical therapy that's been assigned to her by her physical therapist, cover her knee. She's also doing abdominal work so that she can build stronger core strength so that she has more stability in her body. And then she's doing ankle work so that she has more stability in her ankles. That's not coming from the physical therapist. That's coming from her own research and her own inquiry and speaking with other experts. And it's a skill. It's a dedication. It doesn't just happen.
Right.
And people tend to think of healing as like, it just happens, or it doesn't.
Right.
Either it does or it doesn't. It's
right.
Like, no, it's a skill. It's a pursuit.
Well, I also think too, like, what I'm hearing is that it's a participation, and same to the prayer concept, right? Like you said, like God wants to feel that you are there with him as much as he is with you, right?
Right.
So it's a participation back and forth, and
It's
same
an
like same in the
engagement.
healing and engagement. I do have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so your daughter's injury.
Yes.
How did she handle that in terms of her own relationship with God? Like, when bad things happen, there is a tendency to blame the divine.
Sure.
Right? Or think God wasn't looking out for me.
Right.
Did she not, was that an issue at all? Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it wasn't for her because she's grown up in our household and these things are a constant conversation. But yes, that could definitely be an issue for someone. I really do believe that this life is a journey. And the primary purpose of that journey is for us to engage and forge as intimate a relationship with the divine as we possibly can. And part of that engagement, of us being driven into that engagement, is through the challenges that we encounter. So that's praying over our children for their protection does not mean that they will never encounter challenges. And in fact, if they never encounter challenges, I mean, we know in this life,
right,
that tends to be how we grow and how we transform. Right. My hope is not that my children will never encounter challenges. My hope is that they will only encounter challenges that serve their growth and on all levels, and that they will have the resources at the time to be able to meet those challenges and learn the lessons, incorporate that into who they are as human beings, and walk forward from that in a stronger, more skilled, and more faithful way. So what I would say is it was a very painful injury.
Yeah.
And she was in tremendous, tremendous pain. But the beautiful thing was that she, even in her pain, she welcomed, not just aloud, but also welcomed me praying over her, and her father praying over her, and her sister praying over her. And again, even for those who may not have that kind of faith in the divine, you can imagine how beautiful that is.
Yeah.
Emotionally, as a family, how comforting it is. Really having someone pray over you is almost one of the most beautiful experiences of someone else's care for you,
Right.
that you can imagine. There's something truly beautiful about that. But then she does have tremendous faith, and we'll tell those stories another time, because she's had truly miraculous things happen in her life. So no, it didn't shake her faith at all. And she did activate, I was really proud of her. She activated all of her resources. When people asked if they could pray for her, her answer was always yes. And she even reached out and asked a few people to pray for her as well. And she just kind of went deep within.
Wow.
And started researching what could she do to heal. And then started implementing it on her own.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And that could be the greatest gift that you ask for.
Yeah.
Raising a family. If you were to say, like, what are, just a couple little takeaways for like moms at home that, want to protect their kids?
So yeah, I would say the first thing is we don't pray because we expect our prayers to be answered and for our lives to be perfect, because that's actually not the point as far as I can tell. We pray because life is difficult and we need help. That's usually where we start, as I mentioned. But we keep praying because not only do we typically receive the help we need, although it may not come, as you've pointed out, in the form that we were hoping for, but we actually continue to pray because something changes in our hearts, and we begin to develop this relationship that just pulls us in and pulls us in and pulls us in. And there's something, it is ineffable. I can't describe that. I would say, so we don't pray for a perfect life. We pray for everything we need and the help that we need to get through life, which oftentimes that comes down to qualities. It comes down to courage. It can come down to strength, specific skills, opportunities, connections, openings, guidance, wisdom, discernment. We need all of those things. And I would encourage everyone to ask for those things and really think about, like, what are the qualities that I need inside of myself right now to meet the challenges that are in front of me in life. So that would be one thing. But then I would also encourage mothers to get creative and really speak the longings of their heart. So one of the favorite prayers that I have prayed over my daughters is I've asked that they both truly feel as close to me as if they were an only child.
Oh, interesting.
That they
each feel
like an only child. That they each feel like they are getting.
They have all of your love and all of your attention.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I only have one child, but like
so far.
More miracles to come. But you're right, because you always hear about families like, oh, the middle child feels neglected because the older child, and then the younger child gets all the attention, and it's like you want them all to feel equally as loved. I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I feel that prayer has been answered. I haven't asked them, but I do have really close relationships with both of them. And yeah, I'm really grateful for that. And by the way, I'm passing that one on. That was not I didn't come up with that. I learned that from another mom who had 14 children.
Wow.
And so there was a reason why, a bigger reason why she was praying that prayer every day. And when she passed on, her children were interviewed. She's fairly well known. She was an ultra-Orthodox Jewish woman in Jerusalem. Her name was Honey Mackless. And her children were interviewed. And many of them in the interviews, when they were talking about their mom, said, I had a really special relationship with my mom. And
that's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And I thought, well, if God can answer that prayer, yes, maybe you can help me out with my two. And then the other thing that I would say as a take home is I would really encourage every mom especially, but parents, caregivers, anyone who's there putting a child to bed at night. I would encourage you to pray over and pray with the child.
Mm.
And to teach them to articulate what's in their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And so one simple formula is talk about something that you're happy and grateful for,
Mm-hmm.
something that you would like in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and something that you're troubled about, something that you need help with. And that's just a formula. You don't have to follow that formula.
Right.
But it's kind of a prompt.
Right.
There's a couple of reasons for this. One is you're demonstrating, if you're praying over your child, you're demonstrating prayer to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the way most of us learn things is actually by watching others do it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I believe that there is a divine connection that's happening in that as well, and that you are being heard on the other side of that. And that's more valuable than anything. But the third reason is, and I've done this with my girls every night since they were born. And, they went through the stages, and then they could talk, and then they could say it. The other thing is that, especially if you follow that formula or something like it, actually the actual formula I follow is, do you have anyone to forgive?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have anything that you need forgiveness for? That's the opener before we pray.
Mm-hmm.
You will learn things from your children about what's going on in their inner life that you would not learn if you didn't set aside time to do that every single night.
Yeah.
The most significant conversations
Yeah.
I've had with my girls have been as a result of that prompting.
Right.
And so we talk it through,
Mm-hmm.
and then we pray together. And so it's not just for the conversation with God. It's also, it teaches them to look inside and see what's going on in there. One of my goals is that they don't end up with built up emotions that they haven't learned how to deal with, that they're dealing with them from the moment they can talk in whatever form they can. But then also I'm learning about their inner lives.
Right. I love that. That's really beautiful. Because imagine if they went to sleep with those things on their heart, and then, then it just compounds. No, I think that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Brandy, thank you for coming. This was it was lovely just to spend some time with you and talk about all of these things that I've never talked with anybody in a public setting ever before. So yay.
Thank you so much for having me.
And this is a continued conversation, because there's many more things that I still feel like I'm really learning, and I just really value your friendship. So
Thank you. I value your friendship so much. Thank you, Deb.